bombs that fell from the edge of space, jets faster than anything the Allies could field, rumors of death rays, anti-gravity engines, even time machines. During the final years of World War II, Nazi propaganda pushed a single desperate promise: the Wunderwaffe, Hitler's so-called miracle weapons that would reverse Germany's defeat in one decisive blow. Tonight, we're going deep into the bunkers, tunnels, and laboratories of the Third Reich to uncover what these secret projects actually were. Which weapons truly existed? Which were fantasy, fueled by pseudoscience and occult obsession? And how did the reality of these programs shape the Cold War and the technology you see today? This is not a story of admiration, it's a story of terror, delusion, and human suffering, of how a regime threw lives and resources into dreams of superweapons instead of surrender. Stay with me as we open the files on Nazi Germany's darkest experiments. Before we dive into specific Wunderwaffe, we need to understand the mindset that created them. By 1943, Germany was losing the war on almost every front. Allied bombers pounded its cities. The Eastern Front was collapsing. Hitler and his inner circle latched onto advanced technology as a kind of magical escape hatch. If one revolutionary weapon could be built in time, they believed, the Reich could still survive. So they poured enormous resources into rocket science, jet propulsion, chemical weapons, and bizarre fringe experiments. Some of this work was genuinely groundbreaking. Much of it was chaotic, wasteful, and driven by ideology rather than logic. In this video, we'll separate myth from reality across 11 major projects, from the V-weapons to the infamous Die Glocke. If you're into deep, well-researched history, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes. And watch through to the end. The final takeaways might change how you see modern warfare. The most infamous Wunderwaffe were the V-weapons, Vergeltungswaffen, or weapons of vengeance. The V-1 was essentially an early cruise missile, a pilotless flying bomb with a pulse jet engine launched from ramps toward London and Antwerp. Its distinctive buzzing engine earned it the nickname Doodlebug. When the engine cut out, silence meant seconds until impact. More advanced was the V-2, humanity's first long-range ballistic missile. Developed at Peenemünde under Wernher von Braun, it rose beyond the atmosphere before plunging down faster than the speed of sound. Victims never heard it coming. Militarily, both weapons were largely failures. They caused terror and killed thousands of civilians, but they didn't alter the war's outcome. Strategically, Hitler diverted vast resources to them that could have bolstered conventional defenses. Ironically, the V-2's true legacy was post-war. Its engineers and technology fueled the American and Soviet space programs, laying foundations for satellites and moon rockets. If the V-2 was the most advanced rocket, the Me-262 was the most feared aircraft concept, the world's first operational jet fighter. Sleek, swept wings, twin jet engines under the fuselage, it could outrun any Allied plane and tear bomber formations apart. But Nazi leadership sabotaged its potential. Hitler, obsessed with offense, insisted the Me-262 be turned into a blitz bomber, diverting design and production. Fuel shortages, engine reliability issues, and chaotic late-war infrastructure meant relatively few ever flew in combat. Those that did were lethal in short bursts, but jets were fragile, needed long runways, and were easy targets during takeoff and landing. Alongside the 262 were projects like the rocket-powered Me-163 Comet, an insanely fast interceptor that burned dangerous fuels and often killed its own pilots. These aircraft showed what was technologically possible, but in Nazi hands they became desperate, poorly executed gambles rather than war-winning tools. Beyond rockets and jets, Nazi engineers dreamed of colossal aircraft unlike anything the world had seen. Enter the America bomber projects and the so-called flying wing. The idea, a long-range bomber capable of striking New York or Washington, breaking American morale. Designs like the Junkers Ju 390 and the Horton Ho 229 pushed boundaries. The Ho-229, a stealthy flying wing powered by jets, looked shockingly futuristic. Its shape would later echo in B-2 stealth bombers. But in the Third Reich, it never passed beyond a handful of prototypes. Logistics were a nightmare. Lack of fuel, aluminum, skilled workers, and secure airfields made these giants fantasy more than strategy. Plans for nuclear-capable transatlantic bombers existed on paper, but Germany never came close to a usable atomic weapon. The America bomber remains a chilling what-if, emblematic of a regime obsessed with spectacle and revenge, regardless of practical military value. The A-4, later known as the V-2, was only the beginning. At Peenemünde and other sites, engineers sketched an entire family of next-generation rockets. The A9-A10 concept stacked multiple stages to create what was essentially an early intercontinental ballistic missile, a theoretical weapon that could hit the United States from Europe. Some proposals even included manned rocket gliders that would ride atop a booster, skip across the upper atmosphere, release bombs, then glide back toward occupied territory. These ideas foreshadowed spaceplanes and re-entry vehicles decades before they became reality. But that's crucial. They were ideas, not working weapons. Germany lacked the industrial stability, guidance computers, and materials to make such systems reliable. Yet the paperwork mattered. After 1945, Allied teams raced to capture documents, hardware, and personnel. Concepts sketched under the swastika helped jumpstart Cold War missile design, even as the regimes that birthed them lay in ruins. Behind every miracle weapon were people, many of them prisoners. The V-2 program alone cost far more lives in production than it did on the battlefield. After Allied bombing raids hit Peenemünde, rocket manufacturing moved underground to the Mittelwerk complex near Nordhausen. There, tens of thousands of slave laborers from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp toiled in horrific conditions. They worked in tunnels blasted into the Harz Mountains, starved, abused, and executed for the slightest infraction. It's estimated that over 10,000 people died building V-2 rockets. Similar exploitation fueled other projects, from underground jet factories to synthetic fuel plants. When we discuss Wunderwaffe technology, it's essential to remember this context. These weren't sleek, clean science fiction labs. They were brutal death machines powered by forced labor. After the war, many leading engineers were quietly absorbed into Allied programs. Their victims, meanwhile, were often forgotten in mainstream narratives of technological achievement. Nazi science wasn't limited to rockets and jets. The regime also sponsored grotesque human experiments in the name of medicine and racial ideology. At camps like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Ravensbrück, doctors such as Josef Mengele performed experiments on prisoners without anesthesia or consent. These included hypothermia tests in ice water, high-altitude simulations using pressure chambers, deliberate infection with diseases, exposure to chemical weapons, and attempts to change eye color by injecting dye into children's eyes. Many victims died. Survivors were left with lifelong trauma. These atrocities weren't secret in the inner circles. They were tolerated, even encouraged, as part of a worldview that saw certain groups as expendable. After the war, the Nuremberg doctors' trial exposed some of these crimes, leading to the Nuremberg Code, a foundational document for modern medical ethics and informed consent. When people romanticize Nazi advanced science, they often ignore the barbarity that accompanied it. One of the most persistent Nazi legends is Die Glocke, the bell. According to post-war rumors and a handful of dubious testimonies, this was a secret SS project involving a bell-shaped device filled with exotic substances, generating intense radiation and possibly anti-gravity effects. Stories claim Die Glocke was tested in a mysterious structure in Poland, the Henge, and that it may have killed scientists during experiments. Some conspiracy theories go further, connecting it to time travel, UFOs, or a Nazi escape to South America, or even Antarctica. Historically, hard evidence is almost non-existent. No surviving photographs, No clear documentation, only fragments and hearsay. Many historians believe Die Glocke is either exaggerated conventional research, perhaps on centrifuges or nuclear physics, or pure post-war myth. Still, its popularity tells us something. People are fascinated by the idea that the Nazis were on the verge of impossible technology, one secret away from changing history, even when reality says otherwise. Closely tied to Die Glocke myths is the broader idea of Nazi UFOs and anti-gravity craft. You've probably seen illustrations of flying saucers with iron crosses, or claims that German engineers built disc-shaped Haunebu vehicles capable of vertical takeoff. In reality, there were experimental designs for circular aircraft and VTOL concepts, but nothing even remotely close to a true flying saucer fleet. Many of the famous images date from the 1950s and 60s, created by fringe authors, not wartime documents. So why do these stories persist? Partly because Nazi Germany really did pioneer advanced tech, jets, rockets, guided weapons. Once you accept that, it's easy for imaginations to run wild. But the historical record is clear. There is no solid evidence of operational Nazi UFOs. The genuine Wunderwaffe were dangerous enough without adding aliens and anti-gravity. The myth-making says more about post-war culture and paranoia than it does about the actual Third Reich. Another dimension of Nazi secret weapons was ideological and occult. Key figures like Heinrich Himmler were obsessed with pseudo-archaeology, runes, and Aryan mysticism. The SS research organization Ahnenerbe funded expeditions to Tibet, Scandinavia, and the Middle East, searching for supposed evidence of an ancient master race. In parallel, fringe scientists mixed occult ideas with physics, claiming they could tap into cosmic energies or rediscover lost Germanic technologies. Most of this produced nothing but wasted time and resources. Yet it fit neatly into Nazi propaganda about destiny and racial superiority. This occult flavor is part of why Nazi secret weapons loom so large in pop culture. They feel like something out of an Indiana Jones film, because in many ways, the regime itself blurred the line between science, myth, and delusion. When we talk about Wunderwaffe, we're not just talking about hardware. We're talking about a worldview that weaponized fantasy itself. The Nazi weapons program was also riddled with speculative tech that never left the drawing board. Concepts included giant railguns capable of shelling London from mainland Europe, sun-powered death mirrors in orbit focusing beams onto cities, and monstrous tanks like the Landkreuzer P-1000 Ratte, a land battleship too heavy to cross most bridges. Some projects, like the Gustav railway gun, did exist but were wildly inefficient. Others were pure fantasy, proposed by engineers trying to impress leaders who loved big, dramatic ideas. As Germany's situation worsened, this disconnect grew. While troops lacked basic supplies at the front, resources were funneled into prototypes that could never be mass-produced. These dead-end projects reveal a regime losing touch with reality. Instead of adapting to total war pragmatically, Nazi leadership chased spectacle, hoping intimidation and terror weapons could substitute for sound strategy and logistics. When the Third Reich collapsed, its secrets became prizes. The United States, Soviet Union, Britain, and France raced to seize documents, prototypes, and scientists. Under Operation Paperclip and similar efforts, figures like Werner von Braun were quietly moved to America. In the U.S., former V-2 engineers helped develop Redstone and Saturn rockets, key steps toward the Apollo moon landings. In the USSR, captured technology and personnel accelerated missile and space programs that would put Sputnik into orbit. At the same time, Allied interrogations revealed just how chaotic many Nazi projects had been. Overlapping authorities, personal rivalries, and Hitler's interference often crippled what might have been powerful systems. The legacy is uncomfortable. Breakthroughs in rocketry and aviation are intertwined with a regime built on genocide and forced labor. Modern technology owes a debt to victims who never volunteered to be part of history's most infamous weapons experiments. Let's step back and distill what Nazi Wunderwaffe really were and weren't. First, many of these projects were genuinely advanced. The V-2, Me-262, and flying wing concepts pushed engineering forward and shaped the Cold War. Second, they were horribly inefficient. Resources were poured into experimental weapons that arrived too late, in too few numbers, or in unreliable form to change the war. Third, and most importantly, behind every technological achievement was immense human suffering, slave labor in tunnels, medical atrocities in camps, and civilians targeted by terror weapons. The myths, Die Glocke, Nazi UFOs, death rays, persist because they're dramatic and mysterious, but focusing only on fantasy can distract from the very real horror of what actually happened. Understanding Wunderwaffe means recognizing a regime so intoxicated by ideology and spectacle that it tried to engineer its way out of defeat, sacrificing morality, reason, and countless lives along the way. If this deep dive into Nazi Wunderwaffe helped you see past the myths to the darker historical reality, there's more we can explore together. We've only scratched the surface of how science, ideology, and war intertwine, from the nuclear age to modern cyber weapons. Take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already, and click the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming investigations into secret programs, hidden archives, and the technologies that quietly shape our world. It really does help this kind of long-form, research-heavy content survive on YouTube. In the comments, tell me which project shocked you the most. Was it the V-2's human cost, the jet fighters, the occult obsessions, or the post-war scientist race? And what related topic should we unpack next? Operation Paperclip in detail, or the Soviet side of the story? Thanks for watching all the way through, and for remembering that behind every weapon, there are human lives.